So I think it's important for that human in the loop position to be an orchestrator who understands, who has empathy, who takes care of their own team. People managers are not going to go away. You do need that. If you're having an organization, agents are not going to be building wealth. It's human beings ultimately. I think nobody can deny that, right? People who own and adapt to those cultures, I think that's going to be the thing. There's going to be new way of working, new way of getting things done.
Welcome to the Work Matters podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Bertels. In this episode, Ram Venkatraman and I unpack how AI is changing strategic workforce planning. For years, workforce planning was mostly a headcount exercise. How many people do we need, in what roles, and by when? But with AI moving from tool to assistant to autonomous agent, that model is no longer enough. Organizations now have to ask harder questions. What work should humans do? What work can agents do? What skills will matter most? And how do we redesign jobs so people are not left with fragmented, exhausting, or meaningless work? Ram brings more than 25 years of consulting experience and now works at the intersection of AI, HR, talent strategy, and responsible transformation. In our conversation, we talk about skills, task deconstruction, digital teammates, AI fluency, and why well-being, engagement, and growth still matters in an AI-enabled future. In Ram's view, AI collapses the coordination noise so that the human superpower of judgment can lead. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Ram, welcome to Work Matters.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
So today we want to talk about strategic workforce planning, but before we get to that, maybe share with our listeners a little bit about your background.
With over a quarter century of management consulting experience in firms like EY and KPMG, IBM, and the past year or so focused on academics. So I'm bringing my consulting and live implementation transformation experience and mix it with the academic frameworks. So working closely with Rutgers University, I'm one of their executive and residents. In the space of AI and HR, talent strategies, future-focused strategic workforce planning.
Workforce planning has been around for a long time, but a lot of companies still struggle with it. Why is it so difficult to do workforce planning?
8 years back, when there's no AI in the noise, workforce planning still was difficult, as you said. It's an annual process people go through. Take the organizational chart and say, how many headcounts do we need for this organization? What are the roles to be filled? And how do we go about filling capacity? And it was less about the capability. It was more focused on the roles and headcounts and the organization charts. Now we fast forward and come to current times. We see AI slowly coming in. I'm sure 80+% of organizations are already on some kind of pilots, and some may be waiting and watching. But it is already here, so it's not future anymore. And it adds another layer to workforce planning. If you looked at the traditional workforce planning, it was more yearly ritual, HR led. And in many cases, with the introduction of HR business partners in the past 10, 12 years, there was some collaboration with the business leaders. It becomes quite outdated through the time in the year. In quarter one or quarter two, it's already outdated, and people never went back and revisited. That was not working anyway. There were some terms like strategic workforce planning. Hey, let's revisit every quarter. And more recently, even just before the AI, before 22, I've seen organizations talked about, hey, we should move towards skills first. Let's understand the total inventory of skills in the organization and what is needed for this year, next 5 years for the business vision. And now we come to the AI moment where we are talking about AI as a tool, AI as an assistant, AI as an autonomous agent. Workforce planning has players, both human and digital teammates. So then it makes much more challenge. I think we got to reinvent or redo this framework for strategic planning. One of the frameworks I used, Thomas, the 4 Bs, build, buy, borrow, and bought. bot came in, robotic process automation came in. And still, automation was not a major issue when you compare it with the AI challenges we are going to face. In a nice way, it's going to bring in some reinvention and transformation on this whole process. This 4Bs probably becomes a 5. Add another B to this: build, buy, borrow, and bought. Plus, I was looking for the same an acronym with the B, so I said BASE, which is the autonomous agents. So that takes care of the repetitive variable tasks independently operated by agents. So I think it's 5Bs. So that's one framework. Remember to include the agents into the whole equation. The other thing is, you write in your book, Fixing Work, it's about the task deconstruction that needs to happen. The repetitive ones, the variable ones, which jobs, which tasks require high empathy. And then you have data heavy tasks. I read some statistics about in the next 2 to 3 years with AI, customer service or call centers, 60-70% could be run by agents. I'm seeing this happening in many fintech companies in terms of sentiment analysis when the calls go on based on the voice and language. The large language model is already doing it. We are seeing that changes from the traditional to the current day agentic workforce in the play. So I'm more curious to dive in myself, and I'm writing a playbook on how to go about designing this strategic workforce planning for the agentic workforce era.
It seems to me it's like these Russian dolls. You take one apart, there's a smaller one in there. If I try to unpack it in my simple mind, I would say, okay, we want to get a view around what our workforce needs in the future. We want to forecast. And you roll out your crystal ball, you think about your markets, your demand. But now AI, it's really a wrench in that system because it says, gee, maybe a lot of these tasks that people do could be done by agents. How do you even model that out? Because it changes the jobs that you feed into the model. And I find a lot of companies don't have the data to do this. You might have the data if you have a very monolithic business model. You're a McDonald's and you have people in the kitchen and people at the cash register. That's like 85% of the workforce. There, I think it's probably doable. But if I think about a more like knowledge-based organization, that seems to me incredibly hard. What do you think?
It's a good spectrum that you laid out in terms of one, the work deconstruction or the task deconstruction around cognitive work and non cognitive. When I look at my calendar, I want to know what do I want to fill up with. And today, busyness is one of the metric. It's a perceived thing. Hey, I'm busy. I've got to fill up my calendar. I don't have time in my calendar to showcase. So I fill everything. To your point about the agents coming in to the workforce, I think it's going to be autonomous. It's able to decide on its own with minimal supervision. It's going to get certain things done. And we want to fill our calendars with cognitive work. So now come to the industry. When there is a knowledge as the main source of revenue coming from consulting, it's all about the thought leadership, the knowledge. How do we want to help organizations win in their business strategy? How do they go about designing the business vision? So in those cases, I wouldn't hesitate to say there is a lot of non-cognitive administrative work, even in knowledge economy, knowledge business. What about the entry level folks coming in? Folks say, "Oh, that could be done in agents." So I ask why? Because these are the folks who are learning. So let's put all the notes taking, administrative email, traffic monitoring, and anything non cognitive. This can go into the agent. Human beings are smart in saying, hey, let me protect certain things. This happens across the organization, in my opinion. It's not just the entry level. A middle manager could become obsolete if he or she doesn't pick up the AI fluency or adopt to where the job roles are changing. You ask a wonderful question. It's a spectrum. I don't have a magic wand to say how this is going to happen, But I think it'll be good to start reimagining from the knowledge workers or the consulting organizations or the design organizations or even architects. An architect, for example, could have an AI generate 50 versions of his or her design. But ultimately, when this person has to go to a planning board or a zoning commission to get approval, this person would know the cognitive skills coming in to navigate the political connections, political capital, social capital, etc., which the agents may not be trained. So I think it's important to divide this into the cognitive and non-cognitive. And I think it's one of the big things I've been advocating is fill your calendars with cognitive and be open to share with agents on some of the repetitive and non-cognitive tasks. So I think this way one becomes an orchestrator. I think it's about the middle managers becoming an orchestrator of both the human and AI agents.
That's an interesting topic, right? Actually, I just worked a couple of weeks ago with a client who said we should equip all the folks on our team with the ability to build their own agents. And the second sentence she said, and we also got to learn how to manage the digitally augmented workforce, I think she called it. You think about this stuff a lot. What does it even involve? What does managing a digital worker mean? Is it providing the prompts? Is it supervising the outputs? What's involved?
Yeah, let's deconstruct this, right? So in my presentation at Rutgers last week, people asked, what does this mean? AI, in general, there's a lot of noise in the system right now. If you rewind to 2022 after COVID, what we saw was, what is AI? What is this open AI? The chat GPT was one of the names everybody talked about. And it came as a tool. Go back to 90s, 1990s, all these ERP systems and HRIS systems. These were softwares acting as tools. And 22, the AI became assistants. So I could just feed in something, I'll get an email draft of this. So it's an assistant. And now we are talking about moving into 26 and beyond is agents which are autonomous. What I mean by that is it's not going to take everything and run everything, but they have the capability or capacity to make decisions and act. It's no more a tool. So tool, I could pick up something and then do something on with the tool, but now it can act on its own. We call them digital colleagues, digital teammates, agents. And so I think it is the future where we are headed into the autonomous agents who can decide and act. So, what is involved in is training agents, modeling behavior. I believe CVS Health recently deployed what is called a digital twins. So it's modeled after the behavior of some of the customer support representatives, the research folks, various roles. The digital twins are modeled, and you could clone them and say, here is what this customer service representative did. What is the day in the life of a customer service agent? What is the week in the life of a customer service agent? So you train that model and it learns. So previously it was an instruction given, it acted. But now it learns over a period of time the patterns, the behaviors, and it is modeled and it is called the digital twins. I will bring one more statistic that I recently have been following. At least 60% or more of the jobs are going to be redefined. It doesn't mean jobs are going to be lost, in my opinion. I think there's a transition period where there's going to be a struggle. And then there is 80% or more say they have run some pilots and they are into AI assistants and or autonomous agents. 4 out of 5 leaders say they are not ready for this transition. They are very skeptical about the AI fluency. AI is moving from a software tool all the way up to an autonomous agents.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic. One dynamic is the technology just moves so fast that you literally can spend all your time trying to keep up and never do anything. It's just keeping up consumes a lot of time. I think that also locks people a little bit in place. Where do you invest? Which path do you go down? I had an interesting conversation with a client this week, and we're talking about medical information in pharma, the folks that provide information to doctors. And he painted this vision that 10, 15 years from now, we're not going to have people write the letter that goes out that explains side effects. Maybe the doctor just interacts with an agent that has all this information. I think if you see that, that's really clear and realistic. But then you ask yourself, what do I do today? Because it could go down that path. But how, as a leader, do I make decisions about the next person that I hire? I think the workforce planning piece is interesting because you got to develop a point of view which way it's going to go to inform some of the decisions you make. Do you invest in hiring people? Do you invest in building bots? Do you invest in upscaling your people? Where do you get started? What advice would you give? Let's say I'm the head of HR, right? And I got to think about what's my budget for the next 2, 3, 5 years, and what's my headcount for the next couple of years. How do you even get started?
Every CHRO is asking, where do I start? If you look at some of the challenges, the work is decomposing much rapid than the roles can keep up. Who do I hire? What skills do we need to bring? Where I start is a skills inventory. So that is something, a known commodity. So people have been convinced, I would say, or at least close to getting convinced on skills as a currency in the organization. So take a look at the inventory of what skills your organization has. Second, look at what the business needs in terms of skills. I think that's a great starting point. I think it's about understanding the skills inventory and what is needed. I think it is the collaboration that needs to happen with the business leaders. So now, take a step back. You asked, hey, what's your message for the CHROs? If you rewind 10, 12 years back, how the CHROs operated was this transactional work, and then there is expertise or strategic. So then you have a shared services to take care of most of the HR transactions. And then you have the Center of Excellence, COEs, that taught about how do we go about working closely with business? What is the future predictions? How is the business strategy formulated, and how HR can get a seat in the table? With the agents getting involved, you see things changing. So I think the role of the CHRO is also changing. It's not transactional and strategic, it's much beyond. So collaboration with business becomes a key. What needs to be done? Look at the organization outside, your organization, enterprise. What skills are needed? What transformation needs to happen? I think that's the role CHROs need to be aware of. So I think starting with skills inventory and going from there could be a good start, at least preparation for the CHROs.
People have been talking about the transition towards skills for a while. And I've been a little bit skeptical because everybody defines a skill differently. There's not one framework that we all use. So if you look at a resume, you and I would probably pick out 10 skills and they might not align. So I think that's the first challenge. But I also find it very difficult in today's environment because the technology is changing what's possible so fast that whatever decision you make today, you're going to have to revisit a year from now. If it just takes the drudgery out, probably nobody complains, right? But at some point, also the interesting work goes away. The cognitive work, the strategizing, the alternatives to get your head into it. I think that's a concern. And at the end of the day, a job also provides meaning. If we're now punching these big holes into each of these jobs, I think that construct collapses. Isn't that something that as a leader, you also have to take into effect? One is, yes, where can I use the bots and how do I get the work done? But if you end up with a couple of people left that just do soul destroying bits and bobs of what used to be a whole job, I don't feel that's a good outcome either. For me, it suggests that we're going back to this concept of not just hire people for a task or for a set of tasks. You hire them for a set of skills and their ability to learn and adjust and collaborate and partner with others. So I feel like that may be, at least for knowledge work, where it's going to go, because the tool's going to become more powerful. So we need people that are flexible, because we're probably still going to need a handful of humans in the org with good judgment and good ethics. Would you agree or would you disagree?
I totally agree with you in terms of this, some of the discussion topics you brought. So far, I might have sounded like I'm the AI advocate. I'm a good technology enabled person, but I wanted to bring in the second hat that I wear. At Rutgers, I focus on the societal impacts of AI, leading the responsible AI program, AI for Good. Think about all the repetitive ones that goes into an agent and the amount of cognitive load that comes to the human being. That is stressed out. Humans recoup or relax, rejuvenate during the white spaces between work or some repetitive works. We all heard from the time management folks, what's your best time of the day? Use that time to do all the cognitive heavy lifting. But imagine if human beings have to do that 8 hours the whole workday. That's stressful, right? You're pushing the human DNA to some other level. So it's got to be done very carefully. You bring some very important points. How does this human being transition to this whole world of digital teammates, right? I'm not saying 100% we are there. It might happen 3 years or it might be 5 years or 10 years, whatever it is. But the efficiencies have been addictive. Corporates, Wall Street is already picking it up. And there may be some ups and downs in between in terms of the well-being or the transition and the societal impacts of this technology-enabled transformation. If the human being in the loop or the one person who's going to manage this whole thing has no clue of the process or knowledge, or more importantly, the mental model of what these agents are going to do, we are in up for a mess, big mess. So I think it's important for that human in the loop position to be an orchestrator who understands, who has empathy, who takes care of their own team. People managers are not going to go away. You do need that. If you're having an organization, agents are not going to be building wealth. It's human beings ultimately. I think nobody can deny that, right? People who own and adapt to those cultures, I think that's going to be the thing. There's going to be new way of working, new way of getting things done. I wrote an article yesterday in LinkedIn. The title was, if you got 8 hours, if AI saved you 8 hours, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to become more busy? Or you're going to think back and say, hey, how do I redefine this role? How do I elevate my team? So
The assumption obviously is that AI frees up 4 hours in your day. You're still getting paid for 8 hours, right? Because now if you just get paid for 4 hours, you got a problem. You got to find work that pays for the next 4 hours. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people are starting to think about. We'll see how it all plays out, but I would imagine that at some point people wake up to the fact that they're training their replacement. Right? So now we have a digital twin of Ram. Maybe we don't need Ram anymore, right? We'll just send the digital twin to the client and charge a subscription fee. And I guess at least creators are starting to wake up to that, but maybe knowledge workers at some point too. Going back to the point of, like, what do I actually do if I run a shop and it's a bunch of knowledge worker types? You still have this practical question: how do you plan for the future? Where do you need humans? Where can machines do that? What that does to the jobs? How will the technology change? You got to think ahead because everything has a lead time. I just feel it becomes incredibly difficult for people to make any decisions. I'm just wondering, what do people that break out of that, how do they approach it? What do they do differently?
now I shift to my third hat, change practitioner. Change readiness is one of my core areas, especially change management to adopt a new technology. I did a lot of research on how to bring in the change considerations, the human centered change management or transformation. So, what you say is absolutely right? A middle manager, a director, even a vice president in an organization have the same question. What is my role going to be tomorrow? Am I training a digital twin? So, to answer your first question, managers are in that fork in terms of how do I do this? I won't go into solutioning, but I would say this resistance, the skepticism, insecurity is all human. Number one, I think let's accept that. So that is very important to understand before we come and say, hey, we can fix it. Here's a change management plan. We're going to train so many people, blah, blah, blah. Instead, take a step back and accept that. And then the second thing to the managers, to the impacted people or folks who are reached, my advice to them is become fluent on AI. First, you could be one of those champions and leaders when you pick up AI. Second thing, be open in terms of how the job is changing because you hold at least 60 to 70%, which are your unique superpowers, which no agent can come and change. All that you need to pick up is AI fluency, and you will become a champion very soon to in the market. You talked about the future. What does the future look like? I would say there's not a lot of clarity. And that's where I come in. I sit with business leaders and CHROs to brainstorm. And one question I ask is what is the business vision in the next 18 months or 5 years? So you have a pipeline. How does the pipeline look like? So I get into the business discussion in terms of what is the plan, what is the vision, and do you know the skills inventory? That's where I start. And based on that, is the introduction of AI, what is the driver? So I interviewed about 25 board members in terms of what is their journey look like in terms of AI pilots? Where do they feel this is going to happen? How is the business, where is the business headed? So I think it's important to understand the business strategy first. And as part of that, you bring in some clear communications from the top down to say, hey, here's where we're headed. There's a lot of noise in the system today. Employees assuming various things. Hey, this is going to happen. I'm going to lose my job. And my role is going to become obsolete. I need to do something. There's a lot of confusion because there is lack of clear communication from the top. I don't blame the top as well because they don't have clarity. And the silence is not helping.
Yes, there's not a lot of clarity. They don't have it either. At the same time, though, you see companies making these moves. We're going to lay off 10, 15% of people because AI can help us be much more productive. It sometimes can feel like it's a war on humans, that the drive is let's get these humanoids out of this organization. They're difficult to deal with. They don't work 24/7. They want vacations. They might even work for somebody else if I mistreat them. A bot is much more attractive in that sense. I think employees are, I want to say, rightfully scared. There's no corresponding investment at the same time. The money goes into the automation. I can see from an employee perspective that people are very skeptical, which I guess makes it a bigger change management challenge.
I echo your sentiments. I'm seeing the ambiguity, which is very common during these transitions. It's a transition period. Let's assume 26, end of 26 or 27 is the year when good portion of organizations are adopting or converting their pilots into their workflows. There's going to be the period of 2 to 3 years of ambiguity in terms of how the job's going to be redefined. So we are talking about the entry level, then you have managers, middle managers, senior managers, directors. It's not like previous changes we have seen because this is from a perception perspective. I'm sitting on a branch of a tree and cutting the same branch. To your question, there is a lot of insecurity in the system. My research is on how do we protect the tacit knowledge. We are talking about employee engagement is one of the key metrics today for an organization to thrive. If you asked anybody, talent strategy 101 is employee engagement. And now we're going to have, let's say it's 60-40 or 30-70 or whatever that mix is between the agent and the human beings. It's the human in the loop that's going to differentiate, bring the value. The agents might give us efficiency, but I think it's the human in the loop that ultimately is going to generate that value or maximize that value. Human beings, the employee workforce, need to be happy, need to be engaged in doing this. There is a bit of catastrophization by employees. We think 100% of employees are going to be gone, 100% of the functions are going to be gone. But in my vantage point, I see if AI is agents are going to be deployed, it's probably at an average of 40 to 60% in an organization. 40 to 60% of the functions, 40 to 50% of the high friction workflows, the imagination that it is a war against humans. I think that is catastrophization, in my opinion.
I think you're right. First of all, in the real world, things always go a lot slower. Secondly, I think we see the power of these tools and they're incredibly powerful, but they also have real limitations. And it's funny when you ask one of these tools to create an image, you want to make a marketing brochure, and you describe the image, and then you can do 10 attempts, and you feel like you're dealing with the dumbest intern in the world. We can't fire him. If that was a person, that person would be gone. The problem is the machine is we're kind of like tethered to them, so I think we're very patient there. We tend to overestimate or downplay those aspects because we're going to have to use them tomorrow. I hope also that companies realize that you got to enable people to be effective in that new world, right? Whether that is operating, collaborating with robots, whether it is helping you build the technologies that you need. You'll need a few of those, and that's why I think it's in everybody's interest to make sure that those people are engaged, are motivated, feel they're not just cogs in the wheel. I feel like there's hope there. Last question. If you would wave your wand, if you look into your crystal ball, let's look 5 years out in the future. How do you see the world of work?
I'm an optimist. There's going to be lots of new opportunities coming in. This transition period is going to be a struggle, it's always. Leveraging the human superpowers like empathy, ethics, the guardrails that we put in, I think that's going to create more growth in the industry to a new set of roles and jobs. I think that requires human superpowers, which has not been tapped into in the past. So I see growth, I see transformation, and I see the human superpowers thriving. My wish is if we saved 8 hours per week using this agent, hopefully we go into this 4-day work week. Let the human mind relax and be creative. Today, if it is contributing to creativity at a 60 out of 100 points, maybe we jump that to 90%. That could be a return on investment, optimistically. But before you reach that, there's going to be a lot of challenges, transition, chaos. And I think that's where the role of HR and collaboration with the business leaders coming in from a workforce planning standpoint is critical. Think out and don't treat this transition as the end game. The business models, operating models could be changing drastically. I always take this example of Kodak and Instagram and Uber and the yellow taxis. Take all those. We don't have to go 100 years before. I think we are talking about much compressed timeline in which, like, the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see some big changes. I'm optimistic.
I think it's a fascinating topic. Workforce planning, I think, has really changed. It used to be a math exercise and you do a little forecast and nobody cared because they knew it was wrong. So you couldn't hire all these people based on that prediction anyway. You still have to ask for permission. I think that's completely changed. These agents are coming in. What do I need in the future? And what do I need to compete? And there's 5 million answers to that. If we all have a different point of view, what that is, we're never going to get there. The work that you're doing Working with HR leaders, working with executives, I think is probably now more important than it ever was in the last 15, 20 years. So I think in the right spot at the right time.
Three keywords that I think organizations, employees need to keep in mind. My three keywords are well being, engagement, and growth.
Love that. I think that's something I can definitely get behind. Listen, Ram, it's been wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We will put a link with your information into the show notes. So if people want to learn more about your work, get in touch, get help, we're
Sure.
going to make it easy for them. It's been a real pleasure. I always enjoy talking to you. I always learn something new. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Thomas. Likewise, your book is inspiring, and anytime I speak to you, there's something provocative that comes in. So you don't let me just fly by. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe, like, share, or comment. Until next time, let's make work matter.